kings built thrones and priests claimed dominion, there was sky. A vast, breathing expanse of silence and storm. It was not empty. It pulsed with something older than time, something whispered across the winds and etched into the bones of the earth. The people of the land did not need telescopes or doctrines to understand this. They only needed to look up. There, stretched between the heavens and the world below, was the rainbow, a shimmering bridge of light and color, connecting what was seen to what was unseen, and they knew its name, Chiuta. Chiuta, also known as Chauta, Namalenga, or Mafambe, is not just a god. He is a presence, a memory, a force that shaped not only the skies, but the minds and hearts of generations. In the traditions of the Tumbuka, Chewa, and other Bantu-speaking peoples of Malawi, Zambia, and Mozambique, Chiuta was not a distant deity locked behind temple walls. He was the sky itself, the great bow that arched across the heavens, marking the covenant between the divine and the earth. The rainbow was not decoration. It was a reminder, a sign that life was held together by balance, by order, by the breath of a God who existed not above, but within the very fabric of creation. But who was Chiuta before the stories were silenced? What myths were erased when foreign tongues rewrote the script of African divinity? How did Chiuta's voice echo through the sacred mountains, through the rainstorms that nourished the land, through the rituals of the Nyao dancers, long before colonizers arrived with crosses and commands? These are the questions we must ask. These are the truths we must remember. For to understand Chiuta is to understand not just a god, but a way of seeing the world. A way where the divine is not locked in distant heavens, but walks with us in rain, in wind, in light. This journey will take us from the primordial silence before creation, through the stories of Chiuta's birth, to the ancient rituals and sacred sites that still hold his memory. We will not skip a name. We will not rush a story. This is not just a tale of a god. It is the heartbeat of a people, the echo of a sky that still speaks, and a rainbow that still shines. In the beginning, there was no shape, no sound, no color. There was only breath, the first pulse of existence that stretched across an infinite silence. It was not a void of nothingness, but a fertile emptiness, pregnant with possibility. In this primal state, before any name was given, before any god claimed dominion, there was only vibration. It hummed beneath the earth, whispered in the darkness, and waited. Among the ancient people of Africa, this moment was not seen as chaos, but as potential. The elders spoke of a time when the universe itself was alive but unformed, when spirit danced with matter and light flickered like a heartbeat in the dark. This was not an empty beginning. It was a moment of becoming. From this breath, the first principles emerged. The idea of life, the pattern of balance, the promise of creation. It was from this cosmic breath that Chiuta would emerge. But Chiuta did not appear suddenly. His essence was born of the need for connection, for harmony, for a bridge between the sky and the earth. Before Chiuta took form, the energies of creation churned and rippled. Great currents of water and wind, fire and stone swirled through the universe, each seeking a name, a purpose, a way to hold the weight of existence. From these elements, the sacred blueprint of reality began to unfold. The ancient Bantu-speaking peoples told stories of this beginning, not as a history, but as a memory. They spoke of the sky, vast and stretching, heavy with the weight of unspoken names. They spoke of the earth, waiting in silence for rain, for life. and they spoke of a presence that was always there, not yet named, but deeply known. A presence that watched, that listened, that prepared to descend. That presence was Chiuta, not yet in the form of the rainbow, not yet the bringer of rain or fire, but the seed of divinity itself. The stories say that before Chiuta revealed himself as the great bow in the sky, he was the breath that stirred the winds, the pulse that moved the waters, the spark that ignited the first fires. He was the silent architect, drawing the lines of connection between above and below. This was a time before memory, but not before knowing. The elders whispered of it around fires. The now dancers encoded it in steps that echoed the rhythms of creation. The women sang it in lullabies, their voices rising and falling with the breath of the earth. It was the beginning, but not the start. It was the silence before the name. It was the moment before Chiuta's rainbow stretched across the sky and said, "I am here." From the silence of potential emerged the first echo of form, a ripple in the endless breath that shimmered into color. It was not sudden. It was like a dawn that breaks not with the sun, but with a whisper of light. And from this breath of creation, Chiuta revealed himself, not as a figure, not as a man, but as a bridge, a bow. A rainbow arching from horizon to horizon, shimmering with all the colors of the elements, connecting the heavens with the earth. To the Tumbuka, Chiwa, and other Bantu-speaking peoples of Central and Southern Africa, Chiuta was not a god hidden behind walls. He was the sky itself. The great arc of color after the rain was not a weather event. It was his body, his message, his covenant with the world. Chiuta was the rainbow bridge, the living connection between the seen and the unseen, the source and the creation, the divine and the earthly. The stories say that when the earth lay silent, waiting for life, Chiuta stretched himself across the sky to bring rain, to awaken seeds, to call forth green from the brown dust. He became the pathway through which blessings descended. His colors were not random. Each was a frequency, a vibration of energy that resonated with an aspect of life: water, fire, wind, earth, spirit. To see Chiuta's rainbow was to see the promise of balance, the assurance that life would return, that drought would end, that the earth had not been forgotten. But Chiuta was not content to remain distant. He descended in the form of storms, rain that kissed the parched ground, lightning that illuminated the night, wind that whispered through the trees. His presence was in every drop that touched the soil, in every blade of grass that rose to meet the sun. And when the rains came, the people knew it was not just nature. It was Chiuta, answering prayers, responding to rituals, honoring the covenant of life. This covenant was not written in books. It was painted across the sky after every rain. It was sung in the fields as crops grew strong. It was danced in the masked ceremonies of the Nyao, who moved in patterns that echoed the arc of Chiuta's bow. Children learned to watch the sky, not just for weather, but for messages. Elders taught that when the rainbow appeared, one must pause, give thanks, and remember that the world was held together by a promise older than memory. Chiuta's birth was not a moment. It was a revelation. It was the moment when the breath of creation took color, when silence became song, when the sky itself bent low to touch the earth and whisper, "I am here, and I am with you." Chiuta, the great bow, was not alone. His revelation in the sky marked not just his presence, but the unfolding of creation itself into multiple aspects of divine force. From the breath of the beginning and the colors of the rainbow came two distinct energies, Namalenga and Mfambe. They were not separate gods, but manifestations of Chiuta's essence, reflecting the twin forces of creation that brought balance to the world. Namalenga, the creator, was the hand that shaped form from formlessness. It was through Namalenga that the mountains rose, rivers carved paths through the earth, and the animals and humans were given their place in the order of things. The Chewa and Tumbuka believed that Namalenga was the force that turned raw energy into shape, that gave the sky its vastness and the earth its fertility. Every grain of millet that sprouted from the soil, every fish that leapt from the river, every tree that reached for the sky, these were the works of Namalenga. His energy was steady, creative, patient. It was the breath of Chiuta solidified into the structure of the world. But creation was not gentle alone. There was fire, there was storm. There was the power to shake mountains and split skies. This was Mfambe, the lightning, the spark, the force of transformation. Mfambe was Chiuta's energy when it roared, when it flashed in brilliance across the night, when it struck the earth with sudden change. In the stories, Mfambe brought fire to humanity, not as a gift of destruction, but as a tool of renewal and survival. It was Mfambe who taught the people to cook, to forge, to cleanse. His power was feared, but it was also necessary. Without fire, there is no light. Without storm, there is no rain. Without challenge, there is no growth. Together, Namalenga and Mfambe represented the balance of the universe, creation and destruction, calm and storm, structure and change. They were the twin hands of Chiuta, working in harmony to sustain life. The elders said that when lightning cracked the sky and rain poured down, it was not chaos. It was Chiuta speaking through Mfambe and Namalenga, renewing the covenant of life. In rituals, both forces were honored. Offerings were made not just for gentle rains, but also for protection from destructive storms. Songs were sung to honor Mfambe's fire and Namalenga's shaping hands. Together they reminded the people that life is not static. It is a dance of forces, sometimes tender, sometimes fierce, but always in balance. Long before maps were drawn or borders divided the land, there stood a sacred place, a mountain whose stones whispered stories older than words. This was Kafirintiwa, perched atop the Dalanyama mountain range, where the skies feel closer and the winds carry the scent of ancient breath. To the Chewa and Tumbuka people, Kafirintiwa is not just a place. It is a portal, a gateway between the human and the divine, the past and the present, the seen and the unseen. The stories tell of a time when the earth was freshly formed, when Chiuta stretched his rainbow across the sky and called forth life. From the heavens, the first humans and animals descended upon Kafirintiwa, their feet touching the sacred stones and leaving imprints that remain to this day. These are not imagined tales. The footprints are there, etched into the rock, silent witnesses to a time when the boundary between gods and mortals was thin. Elders say that each footprint is a story, a memory preserved by the earth itself. Kafirintiwa was more than a geographical marker. It was a spiritual center, a place where rituals were performed to honor Chiuta, Namalenga, and Mfambe. Pilgrims would climb the mountain to offer prayers for rain, health, fertility, and protection. Drums echoed across the slopes. Dancers moved in patterns that mirrored the arcs of Chiuta's rainbow, and offerings of grain, water, and song were laid before the sacred stones. It was believed that to stand at Kafirintiwa was to stand in the presence of the divine. But Kafirintiwa also held secrets. The elders spoke of hidden pathways known only to the initiated, trails marked by stones arranged in sacred geometry, revealing messages for those who could read the language of the earth. It was said that dreams were clearer atop Kafirintiwa, that the veil between worlds was thinner, and that those who slept there could hear the voices of the ancestors and the breath of Chiuta himself. Even when colonial powers came and built roads, even when churches rose nearby and foreign prayers echoed through the valleys, Kafirintiwa remained. Silent, unmoving, watching, waiting, its stones still hold the footprints of the first beings, and its winds still carry the whispers of the gods. For those who listen, Kafirintiwa is not just a mountain. It is memory made solid. It is the place where Chiuta's promise touches the earth. For the people of the land, Chiuta was never a distant god. He was not confined to the mountaintop or hidden behind sacred symbols. He was the sky above, the breath of rain, the fire of the hearth, the very heartbeat of life. His presence was not reserved for temples, but infused into the rhythms of daily existence. To live was to walk beneath his rainbow, to plant seeds in soil nourished by his rains, to dance and drum in his honor. The people did not separate the sacred from the mundane. For them, everything was sacred. When the rains delayed, communities turned to rituals that reached back to the beginning of time. Rain-making ceremonies were not mere superstition. They were acts of alignment with Chiuta's covenant. Elders gathered in open spaces, bringing together offerings of grain, water, and even the blood of sacrificed animals, not as payment, but as recognition of Chiuta's generosity. Songs were sung in patterns that mimicked the falling of rain. Drums were played in rhythms that echoed thunder, and dancers moved like the wind through fields. It was believed that when the community moved as one, in rhythm with the pulse of the universe, Chiuta's rains would come. But it was not only rain that connected the people to Chiuta. Every aspect of life was tied to his presence. Births were celebrated with prayers to the sky, marriages blessed under the arch of the rainbow, deaths marked by offerings to ensure the departed spirit returned to Chiuta's embrace. The elders taught that to neglect these rituals was to risk imbalance, sickness, or misfortune. The sacred was not optional. It was survival. And then there were the Nyao, the secret society whose masked dances were more than entertainment. The Nyao were guardians of tradition, keepers of sacred knowledge, intermediaries between the living and the dead, the human and the divine. When the Nyao danced, their movements were encoded messages, their masks representing ancestral spirits and forces of nature. The drums they played were not just instruments. They were voices, calling Chiuta's presence into the circle, weaving the seen and unseen into one tapestry of sound and motion. Even today, in villages where electricity hums and modern roads cut through old paths, the Nyao still dance. Their steps still echo the rhythms of the ancestors. Their masks still carry the wisdom of the old ways. And when the rains fall, when the crops grow, when the rainbow arches across the sky, the people know they are not alone. Chiuta walks with them. For centuries, Chiuta's presence wove through the daily life of the people, as constant and reliable as the rising of the sun. But then came a different kind of storm, not one of rain and wind, but of men in iron ships, bearing crosses and guns, speaking of one God and one truth. The colonial invaders did not come to learn from the land. They came to conquer it. And in their conquest, they targeted not just the bodies of the people, but their spirits, their gods, their sacred stories. The missionaries who followed saw the dances of the Nyao, the sacred footprints of Chiuta, the offerings to Chiuta, and called them devilish, pagan, evil. They branded the rainbow not as a covenant of life, but as a superstition to be erased. They preached of heaven and hell, replacing the living sky with foreign promises of salvation. The sacred rituals were banned. The sacred groves were cut down. The elders were silenced, their wisdom dismissed as primitive folklore. And those who dared to remember, who dared to keep the old ways alive, were shamed, persecuted, even killed. But colonial suppression was more than physical. It was psychological. The invaders taught entire generations to be ashamed of their gods, to see their own mothers as witches, their dances as sinful, their offerings as worthless. They replaced Chiuta's rainbow with foreign creeds, disconnected from the land, the rain, the cycles of life. The people were taught to look not to the sky above their heads, but to distant heavens far removed from the daily realities of existence. And yet, through it all, Chiuta did not vanish. He remained in the silent arcs of rainbows after storms, in the sudden crack of lightning, in the quiet prayers whispered beneath the new moon. The Nyao adapted their dances to hide sacred meanings behind masks of entertainment. Elders told stories in coded parables, passing on fragments of forbidden wisdom. Even in churches where foreign hymns were sung, some voices still carried the old rhythms, the ancient cadences of Chiuta's breath. This was not just the loss of a god, it was the attempted erasure of an entire worldview, but erasure is never complete. Memory is resilient. Spirit cannot be truly silenced. Even under the weight of colonial suppression, Chiuta waited, patient, unseen, waiting for the moment when the people would remember the rainbow and reclaim the sky. They tried to bury Chiuta beneath layers of shame and forgetfulness, but the roots of memory run deep. Across the lands where his name was once spoken freely, a quiet reawakening has begun. It is not loud, not a sudden revolution. It is a gentle return, like the first breath of rain after drought, like a rainbow arching across a sky long forgotten. In villages and cities alike, stories of Chiuta are being told again, not as relics of the past, but as living truths woven into the fabric of today. Elders who once whispered the old stories are now speaking them openly, sharing with young people eager to learn. Cultural festivals, long banned or discouraged, have returned with vigor, featuring the dances of the Nyao, the songs that call rain, the rituals that honor the earth and sky. Sacred sites like Chiuta are being visited once more, not as tourist attractions, but as places of pilgrimage where footprints still mark the meeting of gods and humans. The footprints are no longer silent. They speak to those who listen. In Malawi, Zambia, and Mozambique, traditional spiritual leaders are stepping forward, not in defiance of other beliefs, but in remembrance of their own. They teach that Chiuta is not a forgotten god, but a living presence, a force that continues to connect the sky and earth, that speaks through the rainbow, the wind, the crackle of fire. They show that rituals are not empty traditions, but acts of alignment with the universe, acts that bring balance, health, and understanding. Even among younger generations, many of whom were raised in environments far removed from ancestral practices, there is a growing hunger for connection. Some seek out elders to learn the old songs and dances. Others study the meanings behind Chiuta's names, Chauta, Namalinga, Mafambe, and find in them not just stories, but keys to a worldview that honors balance, respect, and harmony with nature. Scholars are beginning to document these traditions with respect, ensuring that the legacy of Chiuta is preserved, not just in academic texts, but in the living practices of the people. In a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, the return of Chiuta is a reminder of wholeness. It is a return to a time when the sky was not silent, when the rainbow was not just light, but a promise. The great bow stretches once more across the heavens, inviting all to remember, to listen, and to live in balance. Even after centuries of silence, the rainbow still stretches across the sky. Its colors are not dimmed by time, not erased by conquest, not silenced by foreign tongues. It is Chiuta's covenant, still shimmering, still speaking to those who choose to listen. In every crack of thunder, in every arc of rain after drought, in every child who gazes upward with wonder, Chiuta breathes. His presence is not trapped in the past. It is here. It is now. The journey of Chiuta is not merely a story of a god. It is the story of a people, of a land, of a relationship between sky and soil, spirit and matter, past and present. It is a reminder that the divine is not locked in distant heavens or buried under foreign creeds. It lives in the rhythms of life, in the balance between fire and water, creation and destruction, silence and song. It lives in the footprints of ancestors, in the whisper of winds over sacred stones, in the laughter and tears of those who remember. As the world rushes forward, forgetting its roots, Chiuta stands as a symbol of what was never truly lost. The rainbow still arches above, not as decoration, but as a bridge, a connection between what we see and what we feel, what we remember, and what we hope for. It invites us to step back into alignment, to honor the cycles of nature, to dance the old dances, to sing the old songs, to pour libations to the earth and the sky. It calls us to remember that we are not alone, that we walk under the same sky our ancestors once did, and that the divine breathes through us all. So the next time you see the rainbow after a storm, do not just marvel at its beauty. Listen, feel, remember. It is Chiuta's voice calling us home. It is the breath of a God who has never left, waiting for us to return. The rainbow still shines, and through it, Chiuta's eternal presence whispers, "I am here. I have always been, and I will always be."